I'm 84 years old now. Most mornings I wake up before the sun. Not because I want to, but because sleep doesn't hold me the way it used to. In that quiet hour, when the house is still and the world hasn't asked anything of me yet, I finally understand why my children drifted away. It took me this long. That's the part that hurts the most. I'm not telling this because I expect forgiveness or understanding or comfort. I don't have much use for those anymore. I'm telling it because time has narrowed my world down to memory, and some memories don't leave you alone until you speak them out loud. I live alone now. The house is bigger than I need, but smaller than it once felt. There are rooms I don't really enter anymore. The walls still hold old photos, but I don't look at them often. Not because they're painful, exactly. More because they remind me of how certain things slipped away without making much noise. When you're young, you think distance only happens when someone storms out or says goodbye. You don't realize it can happen quietly, over years, through ordinary days that feel harmless at the time. I didn't wake up one morning and decide to push my children away. I loved them. I still do. That's not a lie I tell myself to sleep better. It's true. I provided for them. I worried about them. I talked about them proudly to anyone who would listen. But I didn't really see them. Back then, I thought I was doing everything right. I was in my 30s when they were small. I had a steady job, one that demanded long hours but paid the bills. I wasn't cruel. I wasn't absent in the obvious ways. I came home most nights. I sat at the table. I asked how school was. I just didn't linger. I grew up believing that duty mattered more than presence. My own father worked himself thin. He wasn't unkind, but he wasn't available either. That was the model I knew. You show love by keeping the lights on, by making sure there's food, by not falling apart. You keep moving. You don't dwell. When my children were young, they would tug at my sleeve while I read the paper or sorted through bills. They wanted to show me drawings, tell me stories that didn't go anywhere, ask questions that didn't need answers. I listened with half my attention. I nodded. I smiled. I told myself there would be time later when things slowed down. Things never slowed down. There was always another deadline, another responsibility, another reason to be tired. I believed tiredness was proof that I was doing my job as a parent. I didn't see that it was also an excuse. As they grew older, they talked less, not suddenly, just gradually. Their voices became more careful. I noticed, but I didn't ask why. Asking felt like opening something I didn't know how to handle. We didn't fight much. That's something people often get wrong. They think distance comes from conflict. In our case, it came from politeness, from keeping things smooth, from not wanting to upset the balance of the household. I was proud of that at the time. When they were teenagers, I mistook silence for independence. I told myself they didn't need me the way they used to. I congratulated myself for raising children who didn't cling. I didn't realize they were learning how to be alone in my presence. I missed school events more often than I remember attending them. There was always a reason. Work ran late. I was exhausted. I assumed there would be another one. I assumed they understood. Children understand more than we think. They also remember more than we want them to. There were moments I could have changed things, small ones. A conversation in the car that I cut short because I wanted quiet. A question they asked that I answered too quickly, too practically. Times when they were upset and I responded with advice instead of listening. I thought being helpful meant fixing things. I didn't know that sometimes they just wanted to be heard without being corrected. When they left home, I felt proud. Sad, of course, but proud. I told people they were doing well. I believed that meant I had done well, too. We spoke on the phone. Holidays happened. Birthdays were acknowledged. On paper, everything looked fine. But visits became shorter. Calls became less frequent. Conversations stayed on the surface. They told me about work, about the weather, about practical things. They didn't tell me about their fears or their disappointments or their private joys. I noticed that, too. I told myself it was normal. Adults have their own lives. Parents aren't meant to be central forever. I repeated those thoughts whenever the quiet felt too heavy. Years passed that way, not dramatically, just steadily. Then my wife got sick. Illness has a way of stripping things down. Suddenly, the days were slower. The house was quieter. I sat with her through treatments, through long afternoons where neither of us had the energy to talk much. I saw how fragile time really was. She asked me once, not long before the end, if I thought the kids were happy. I said yes. I said it quickly. I needed it to be true. After she died, the house changed. Even the air felt different. Grief didn't arrive loudly. It settled in like dust. The kids came for the funeral. They stayed for a few days. We hugged, we cried, we shared stories. Then they went back to their lives. I expected more after that. More calls, more visits. Loss, I thought, would bring us closer. Instead, it exposed how far apart we already were. I was lonely in a way I hadn't known before. Not just alone, but unseen. I reached out more. I called. I asked to visit. Sometimes it worked. Often it didn't. Schedules were full. Lives were busy. I understood that. I really did. But understanding doesn't make the evenings quieter. The turning point came one afternoon when I realized I didn't know who my children were anymore. Not really. I knew facts, jobs, addresses, names of partners, but I didn't know what kept them up at night. I didn't know what they were afraid of. I didn't know what they wished I understood about them. And I knew, with a kind of cold clarity, that this wasn't something I could fix by trying harder now. That's the cruel part of time. It lets you see clearly only after it removes your ability to act. I replayed years in my mind, not the big moments, but the ordinary ones, the times I chose efficiency over attention, the way I treated conversations like tasks to complete, how often I assumed love was understood without being expressed. I realized that my children didn't drift away because I was unloving. They drifted because I was unavailable in quiet, consistent ways. I was there, but not present. You can't rebuild closeness from the end. It has to be built from the middle, from the daily accumulation of being known. Some things can't be repaired once they've thinned out too much, not because anyone is cruel, but because habits harden. Distance becomes normal. Reaching out feels awkward on both sides. I don't blame them. That took time too. Blame is comforting, but it isn't true. What's gone is the version of me who could have shown up differently. What's gone is the childhood version of them that still wanted me without hesitation. What's gone are the years where a simple change would have mattered. I have moments now, sitting at the kitchen table, when I think about calling just to say nothing important, just to hear a voice. Sometimes I do, sometimes I don't. I've learned that not every silence needs to be filled, but some silences are the result of too many unfilled moments in the past. If you're listening to this and you're younger than I am, I don't have instructions for you. I don't know your life, only know mine. I know that love needs time more than it needs intention. I know that being busy can feel responsible while quietly costing you everything that matters. I know that children don't need perfect parents, but they do need parents who stay curious about who they're becoming. I wish I had asked more questions without steering the answers. I wish I had sat longer at the edge of their days. I wish I had understood that there is no later guaranteed. Now my time is measured differently, not in plans, but in mornings and evenings. I don't expect reconciliation.
I accept the relationship we have, even as I mourn the one we didn't build. There is still love here. It just lives alongside regret. If this meant something to you, if it stirred a thought you've been setting aside, you don't need to do anything dramatic. Just notice it. Sometimes noticing is the beginning of presence. As for me, I'll finish this and make some tea. The sun will rise like it always does, and I'll sit with what I know now, even though I learned it late. That's all there is left to do.